live from the Six Pack Campers mobile podcast studio and community development center. This is the Small Truck Campers podcast, episode 16. I'm your host, Spencer Hayes. We got a lot of exciting stuff to cover this episode, so why don't you grab your favorite campfire beverage and let's hit the road. All right, welcome, episode 16. I actually had to do that take twice because I kept calling it episode 15. And I'm just, every time I do an episode, I'm like, dang, we're already here, episode whatever, 16 though. That's so great. I'm just so thrilled that you guys have been listening along. You guys like the podcast, getting some really good feedback, and I'm excited just to keep it going. I've been able to connect with some really interesting and awesome people, and today's episode is no different. But first, I'm going to quench my thirst here with a nice Guyayki Yerba mate. Thanks for the support, Guyayki. Love the stuff, and I love cracking one open before a podcast or a long drive. Just really gets me going. It's some good energy. But yeah, thanks, Guyayki, for the support. Thanks to Grayl water purification systems, and now to Poseidon Bicycles as well. So thanks for the support. Really appreciate it. Really keeps me motivated to keep this thing going. It's awesome to have some cool partners out there in the community that support our community. So check out those companies. All the links are below, and they make some great products that I think you guys would really dig. So check them out. But yeah, episode 16. Thanks so much for joining me. So great to be here. We got some interesting industry news I want to share, and then we're going to dive right into our episode with our guest speaker on this podcast episode. There's not a whole lot of information I want to talk to you guys about in terms of what's going on in the industry. I do want to make note though that our friends over at Wasatch Overland in Salt Lake City, Utah, hey, they hit me up a few days ago with an announcement that they're ready to drop information on their Overlander Tough Port Shell camper. This is a single one-piece molded composite unit. And it's going to be pretty awesome. Check them out, wasatchoverland.com out of Salt Lake City. This Tough Port Shell, they're made in Canada and then shipped down here. And Wasatch is kind of the, I don't know if they're the sole importer of Tough Port, but they're one of the main importers of Tough Port. And they've done a really cool job with their sliding camper models for trucks. And now they're offering this Overlander model, which honestly, it's super cool. It's like compact, lightweight, low profile. And the Tough Port stuff, I mean, it's like fully insulated. I think it's R22 value. It's waterproof. It's one unit. Like it's a sealed one unit. So think like Bigfoot campers and Northern Light campers. And I think this is like a notch above that. So I'm excited to check them out. Really want to get out there and do a little tour of their facility. They've been super supportive of the channel. And I just want to put that little plug in there. So check them out, Wasatch Overland. They got that cool camper coming. Should be here this summer. There's a ton of, new campers coming, as you guys know, and just been seeing a lot. It seems like there's a lot of campers that are ready to, in the next few months or this summer. So I think this summer is going to be really great in terms of new models coming out, like that Lance we talked about last podcast episode. I know Capri has the Lone Star Mini. I don't know if that's in production yet or not. And now this Overlander from Tough Port is going to be really cool. So check them out. Yeah, episode 16. This episode is, I get a ton of questions, and I don't know a whole lot about insurance. And we're going to cover a lot of stuff about insurance, insuring your rig, how the insurance companies value it. Our guest speaker today is David Hampton. He's been an insurance broker for a long time now. We're going to talk about that. And he's also a fan of small truck campers, and he also has a small truck camper. So this will be the guy to go to with all of our insurance questions. And hope we get some questions answered. And, turn to this podcast episode as like a tool you guys can reference in the future when working out insurance, how much things are valued at, how to get claims, Mexico insurance for Baja, all that stuff. We're going to cover all that in this episode. So stay tuned as we welcome our guest, David Hampton from Hampton Insurance Services. So
cool. Yeah.
So I'd like to welcome today's guest, David Hampton from Hampton Insurance. He's up here in the Bay Area. We've been talking for a while. He's a fan of the Instagram and the community. And he's also a small truck camper owner. And he's going to hear and answer some of our insurance questions. So, David, thanks so much for making the time to meet up today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Spencer. I really appreciate being on the show. Looking forward to it. Longtime listener and follower on the Instagram page. Actually, funny enough, I got to give my wife some credit. She's the one who found you guys. And she pointed me in your direction. And so as soon as I saw it on Instagram, I was like, oh, yeah, I got to start following these guys. So. Yeah.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's cool. And we've had a few emails over the years, so it's cool to finally be chatting to you on the, having this time to connect. And just getting into it, I mean, do you still have your? I think you had like what, an F-150 with a camper on the back, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, yeah, still rocking the rig. I've got a 2017 F-150 Super Crew with the short bed, like the five and a half foot box, the 3.5 EcoBoost, and yeah, I got that uh, January of 2020. Right before the COVID lockdowns and stuff started hitting. But yeah, I still got it, and I've got the camper on the back, and yeah, still been taking trips, and yeah, it's a great rig. Yeah,
Yeah, what kind of camper is that on the back? I forget.
it's a yeah, it's definitely a unique model. I didn't really know I was getting in so deep into the unique camper space when I started shopping for it, but it's called a Duraron. My pronunciation is probably terrible, but it's Brazilian company, so it's made in Brazil, and it's called a Duraron camper, and it's a also 2017. Funny enough, yeah.
Perfect. So period correct. That's funny.
Yeah, yeah, it's like I feel I kind of got into the same thing that everybody does with small truck campers. It's like you buy your truck first, and then you never think about what you're going to put on the back until you've got your truck and you're like, oh, well, now I've got this 5.5 foot bed that no camper is going to fit on. And, luckily I've got like decent payload, but all the campers that I wanted, of course, probably should have gotten F-250. So
Yeah.
I was like, just doing a lot of searching for campers that would fit. And funny enough, I found this one on eBay of all places, and it was for sale by a Brazilian couple that were just finishing up their Pan American Highway trip, and they were actually getting ready to ship their truck and camper to Africa. They were doing like a round the world trip, and they're like, well, instead of shipping it, let's see if we can put it on the market and see if anybody will buy it. And so I ended up buying the camper, and my buddy bought the truck. So it all just kind of worked out.
Wow, that's incredible. That's a really cool story and a very unique camper. So I'll have to repost that photo you sent me a while back of the rig because it's yeah, it's definitely U-turn worthy. You know.
Yeah, for sure. I get some looks in parking lots from time to time. I definitely get, people coming up and wanting to check it out. It's just really unique build. It's got like drop down stairs that, for the door. It's 100% fiberglass. Um, and it's got like a unique layout. It's got, a full kitchenette. It's got a wet bath, and it's only got like a 6 foot floor. So it's like a really compact, camper, which I liked. And it's fiberglass, so it's kind of like got that earth roamer style build to it, but I got a really good deal on it. So it was just kind of like one of those lifetime things I couldn't pass up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's cool. You took advantage of it, and you're still enjoying it. So that's great to hear.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had to. Funny enough, I everything is in Portuguese in the camper, so I had to like get Google Translate out and relabel everything. I had to like
Oh,
rewire the whole system and like,
wow.
but yeah, I've got it all fitted out with like nice 200 amp hour, uh, life lithium ion phosphate battery and solar and everything. So it's off grid capable now. We've been digging it.
Dang,
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's great to hear. And I think, aside from talking rigs, which we could talk about all day,
all day.
uh,
Yeah.
the reason I wanted you to come on the show today is you have such a good knowledge about insurance and insuring rigs and just insurance in general is such a to me it's kind of like electricity. Like you need it, it's there, but I don't know how it works really, and I'm kind of afraid to get involved with it. And usually it's easier just to call a professional. And you obviously have been kind of my point man when people have questions. I usually point them to you. So if you could just give me a background about how you got started in the insurance industry and kind of what you currently do, and we'll segue more into like specific stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been, yeah, LinkedIn reminded me I've been doing insurance for, almost 15 years now, which is a little bit of a surprise to me. But I basically, got started in the industry. I graduated from school right into a recession, and there just weren't a lot of jobs. And, but my family, they all worked in the insurance industry and a variety of different things. So I got right into sales, and I started doing health insurance for a long time, just doing my own book of business, building my own stuff out of Sacramento. And then I started working for some large brokerages in San Francisco for a long time, and kind of learned how the commercial aspect of it works, and was still doing mostly health insurance related stuff. But then I transitioned over to doing like property and casualty work, and opened up my own brokerage, Hampton Insurance Services, and was getting contracted with a variety of different insurance companies that provide, auto, home, life, stuff like that, while also doing health insurance. So I still do both. I try and be like a one-stop shop for, all my clients. And a few years ago, I got connected with Farmers Insurance. So I was our agency owner with them, and I still work with them primarily, but I'm also an independent agent. So I'm contracted with a variety of different insurance companies. So I like not being tied just to one insurance company. You don't have to just sell their products. You can just do what's right for your clients, and, find something that really fits their needs and price. So that's kind of my goal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and that totally aligns with kind of where I'm coming from. Like you just said, trying to kind of custom make these insurance policies per each client. And I think the easiest way just to get started with this conversation is I know there's a lot of stuff we want to cover. You said the market's changed in the past couple of years. I want to like learn all about that. But I think the easiest way to start would be the number one question I get is like someone has maybe an older truck with an older vintage camper, and they're like, "How do I get this thing insured?" Um, is it by Blue Book? Do you have an agent? Can you insure something for, what the customer wants it valued at? I guess these are all the questions we want to go over. So however you want to start is fine. But these are the questions I get all the time.
Absolutely. And it really is kind of a case by case basis, because you got rigs and trucks from, older, Ford models, with older campers, all the way up to, brand new $80,000 trucks with $100,000 campers on them. So it really, you kind of have to look at each case individually. But a good place to start is to kind of figure out what you're going to be doing with the rig. Is this just like a temporary thing? Is that, are you doing a flatbed model? Is it going to be like a permanent RV? Are you going to be doing kind of like a full-time situation in this rig, or is it just like a weekender? So once you kind of have that figured out, that'll show you kind of the path you can take to how you're going to insure it. And I'll just kind of give you an example. If you are just using it on weekends, I would go in and just get a regular auto policy on that truck. And depending on what insurance company you're going with, a lot of insurance companies will provide you coverage for whatever's in the back of that truck. So you can, for example, like Farmers Insurance, what they'll do is they'll insure the truck first, and then if you have a camper, you can list that on your policy, and it'll cover the camper as well. But you also might have like a separate RV policy to cover the camper when it's not on the truck, if any damage happens to it, because it's, technically, it is an RV. So you have to kind of look at it as like you're insuring an RV, not like you're insuring just a regular vehicle. That's kind of like the first thing I would do. And of course, like talking to an insurance agent is usually what I recommend, or reaching out to us. We can usually guide you in the right direction of how you want to ensure that setup. Um, you know, Insurance is constantly changing, especially like over the last few years. We've seen like really high claims, and people who have been keeping an eye in the industry have probably realized that there's a lot less options now than there used to be. So insurance companies, over the last year have been leaving California. I live here in California. I specialize in California insurance, and we've just seen a lot of insurance companies just leaving, and that's because of extremely high claims, especially due to the fires that we had. Auto insurance has been less affected than like the market, but it's all connected. If an insurance company pulls out of the state, they're going to be pulling out a lot of their auto policies and RV policies. Um, and auto policies, aren't really making these insurance companies a lot of money lately, especially because there's high claims, there's a lot of accidents, there's a lot of break-ins, a lot of stuff's going on. So these insurance companies are losing out on these vehicle policies and especially RV policies and stuff like that. Um, so they're just not offering them like they used to. And the ones that they are offering may not have the coverage that it used to. And it's more difficult to find. So now what we're finding is that, policies that used to take us an hour to get, it takes us days to get now. So that's a long answer, but I would start with, talking to an insurance agent and going from there really to get more details. I can definitely provide, case by case examples. I can provide details of how to read policies, but um, the person that's going to know the best how to work that is a licensed insurance agent. Yeah.
I see. And I think that's a great answer, first of all, and that's not shocking they're leaving California, but you start to think of, like, yeah, the fires, the break-ins, the natural disasters, and then you go into say, like, yeah, auto insurance policies aren't really, like, the moneymaker, and, it kinda makes sense, so that's wild to hear, and that reminds me of another question. Do insurance companies specify in one state, or can, like, could someone from California call a Colorado insurance company, or could someone from Colorado call, like, I don't know, a California insurance company, or is it state specific?
That's a good question. Yeah, because I get that a lot actually, and it is specific. So it depends on the most important thing, especially for like campers and RVs, trucks, is what state the vehicle's registered in. So if the vehicle is registered in California, you're going to need a California auto policy. If you're registered in, Texas, Nevada, any other state, you're going to need a policy written in that state because every state has different insurance laws. And
Okay.
California has probably the most unique insurance laws. Um, and
The
so
hardest to do with.
definitely, there's just so many more rules here than there are in other states, and every state has different claims data. And so every insurance company essentially judges the price of their policy based on the area that that property is insured in. So for example, if you have a car or a truck or a camper, and you live in San Francisco, your premium is going to be way higher than it's going to be if you live even in like Marin County or Sonoma County, or if you live farther north or outside of a major metropolitan area, and they're taking you know the price into consideration based on claims, and when you have so many break-ins and stuff, um, that's going to raise your price. Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. That's yeah, that's wild. So first thing is it is state specific. Secondly, you know, a lot of us in the community, we don't have, a brand new 2023 Tundra and a brand new four-wheel camper with a clean bill of sale. Um, and a lot of times I think there's hesitation when we're picking up the phone to call, I have USAA or Geico or whatever, and we're afraid the person on the other end of the line, they're not really going to see the picture that we're seeing. Maybe it's like my truck right now is late 90s truck and my camper is an early 2000s camper. What do you think? Do you think, you were talking earlier about calling the or calling the insurance agent. What is the probability that they kind of get it, or that they will understand kind of where we're coming from? And is there a process to shop around for different insurance agents?
Yeah, that's another good question. The probability that they're going to know what you're talking about is pretty low. I work with a lot of insurance agents, and not a lot of them like even have an RV or like know what truck campers are. So, and especially now that the truck camper market has just exploded after COVID. There's so many different models out there. the chances that an insurance person on the other end of the phone knows what you're talking about are probably slim to none. So, yeah, happy to provide some advice on how to handle that. When you're talking to insurance
Yeah.
adjusters and agents. And but I will say though, some agents really do know the market and like like myself, or there's tons of stories you read about, like with state. There's like that famous story for like State Farm agent who like insured that like huge four-wheel camper rig that like fell off the side of a mountain, and it was like $100,000 claim, but he got all his money back. So there are good agents out there that do know how to insure this stuff, but it can be rare. So I guess my advice is, um, with a vehicle itself, with the truck, that's going to be easy. They're going to be able to look that up. They're going to be able to get the Kelly Blue Book on it, or the ADA, and find out what the estimated value of the vehicle is. Now, an important thing when it comes to insurance, and we're kind of getting into the boring weeds of insurance here, but the two main things to really remember when it comes to insurance is the difference between, it's called actual cash value versus replacement cost value. And those are the two most important things, because most auto policies and RV policies, trailer policies, are written as an actual cash value. And what that means is the replacement amount of money they're going to give you to replace that vehicle or RV or camper is the actual cash value based on depreciation and wear and tear. And so that takes into account the age of the vehicle, how it looks, what the maintenance has been, and that is usually determined by an adjuster, an insurance adjuster. And some policies, it's very rare, but you also may find a replacement cost value uh, policy, and that is going to give you what the replacement cost would be, based on the current market. So you typically are going to get less money back, in under a claim with an actual cash value policy versus a replacement cost value policy. So those are just something to kind of some keywords to keep in mind when you're shopping for policies.
So yeah, so just to recap,
Yeah.
actual cash is the depreciated value of the vehicle. Replacement cost is going to be a little bit higher, and that's going to take into account what the market is saying this car is worth.
Yeah, exactly. A good example of that is, if you buy a brand new car and you drive it off the lot, as soon as you drive that car off the lot, the depreciation is you've already taken a huge hit on that vehicle. So you've almost already lost money on it because it's depreciated so much as soon as you drive it off. So we run into problems sometimes where somebody buys a brand new car, they insure it, but maybe they financed the taxes, they finance, you've got maybe $50,000 car after taxes and everything is financed. You drive it off the lot, you get in an accident right down the road. Insurance company is going to give you what the depreciated value of that vehicle is, so you may only get $40,000 even though you still owe $50,000 on it. And so that's kind of an example of how actual cash value works,
Okay.
versus replacement costs, where if you drive it off the lot, it gets in an accident, you've got to go back to that dealer and buy a brand new one. So they're going to give you the money that it would cost to replace it.
Awesome. That's good. And do for the replacement cost policies, those must be harder to shop around for then because you're getting more value essentially with your insurance policy. Is that kind of accurate?
Big time. Yeah, they're
That's
much harder to find, and they're going to be a lot more expensive. I would say most of the policies that I've seen, especially in California, are going to be actual cash value policies.
okay.
Yeah, and so so that's something. So especially when we start talking about older vehicles, for example, like Land Cruisers, for example, right? Land Cruisers are so popular right now, and people are paying a huge premium for them. So they'll pay, I don't know, maybe 20,000 to $50,000 for a 1996, 80 series. Um,
Yep.
and they crash it. they're not going to get that money back. They're going to
Yeah.
get the depreciated value, and that vehicle, if it was made, is 1996, it's already fully depreciated. So if they have an actual cash value policy, they may only get like 10 grand back. But if you have a replacement cost value policy, they'll check the market, look at what they're going for, and you may get more, you may even get the full amount back. So that really is comes down to the adjuster that you have, during a claim or during an accident. And I would say the amount of money you get back is definitely correlated to the insurance company that you go with, you know.
Okay.
So also something to keep in mind. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. But
So
yeah, go ahead.
I know you got your own company. Um, are there any insurance companies that you would say would be the first ones you would reach out to if you wanted to get something insured that was more unique? Are there any companies that come to mind that you would say, "Hey, call these guys first," you know?
For sure. Yeah, there's definitely a list of insurance companies off the top of my head that I think would are better suited to handle like custom jobs and stuff like that, for especially with truck campers. Like your big name brands are definitely better suited these days, I would say, to handle that kind of stuff, like Farmers, State Farm, Allstate. Um, those are all companies that are considered like premier insurance. So you have a dedicated agent, you'll have someone that can really get into the policy. And they also have ways of listing out additional features that you may have added. So if you have any upgrades on your vehicle, you can add those to the policy. Um, if you go with, and I don't want to, talk too bad about, you know, cheaper insurance companies like Geico or Progressive, for example. They offer a great product, but you may not have the customization to that policy that you would with other big names. And the difference is, though, you are going to pay more. So, for Premier Insurance, you're going to pay a higher price than you would for, a Geico or Progressive policy where you have more basic coverage. Um, and you'll have a lower premium. But going back to your other question about how to like approach the companies when you're talking to them about campers, since you've already got your truck, they can look up your truck. But when you're talking about the camper itself, um, I usually recommend, if you have like a unique camper, like me, for example, it's a Brazilian made camper that no one's going to be able to look up online very easily. I usually recommend giving them an example of a well-known brand here in the United States, something that they can easily Google and figure out what you're talking about. Like Lance, obviously they can look those up very easily. Four-wheel campers, easy to check out. Um, and I know there's so many more now, but I would say
Yeah.
the bigger the brand name you can give them, the better or easier time that representative or agent is going to have looking it up and knowing what you're talking about and be able to like familiarize themselves with it, if that makes
Okay.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know, for example, California, I think they treat the camper as cargo, like we talked about earlier. And I think Oregon, you need to actually have insurance for the camper, or maybe not Oregon, but for example, it could be separate. But we'll stick mostly to kind of your bread and butter, which is California. Something I
Well,
guess
it's
to
but
take
it,
into.
it's pretty similar stuff actually, because
Oh, okay.
um, if it's your camper is considered cargo in your truck, right? So even if you have like an auto policy for your truck, and the camper is considered, it's on the back of it, and so it's covered, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going to be covered. So a lot of those policies, they're not going to cover break-ins, for example. So if your camper gets broken into and all your stuff gets stolen, that's not going to be covered. It's usually, same goes with auto policies. If your car gets broken into and you get all your stuff stolen out of your car, it's not covered on your auto policy. It's covered on your homeowner's policy or your renter's policy.
I see. Okay.
So same goes with RVs and campers. But if you get a specific RV policy for your camper, they usually will cover, an amount of personal property for break-ins, um, smashed windows, things that are, sawzalled off the side of your camper,
Yeah.
th- things like that. Also, a lot of them will, if your rig is like off your truck too, then it's not necessarily going to be covered by your auto policy. So, if
Okay.
you're taking your camper off and on, then you may want to get like an RV policy to cover it. So, if one of your jack stands breaks, falls over, tips over, wind or rain, fire, what have you, or heaven forbid it gets stolen, you might want to have an RV policy for that too.
Okay. That's great. That's great to hear. Um, do you think would it be possible? Well, let me back up. I had a camper that was permanently affixed to a flatbed truck a while back, and I was able to insure it as an RV, even though it was a truck with a camper on the back. But it was bolted down. Like there was no way you could get it off, but it wasn't easy. Um, is there anything saying like you can't just go ahead and get something registered as an RV instead of a truck? I think it was cheaper too to get RV insurance. I think.
Yeah, RV insurance is definitely less expensive than a typical auto policy. And their understanding is that it's an RV. You're not going to be using it like a daily commuter, so the chance of you
Yeah.
getting in an accident are much lower. So your premiums are going to be down. But to answer your question, yeah, so that's kind of like a more common thing with flatbed truck campers, is you can just get them insured as, at least in California, you can get them insured um, as an RV. Now a lot of these insurance companies are working with like a preset list of stuff that they're going to insure. And so every insurance company is going to be a little different with that. Some you can just like put in the make, model, year, VIN, and boom, you've got a policy. Some
Okay.
companies have like a preset list of RVs and or companies that they'll insure. So if you're dealing with one of those, then you need to kind of find something that's really similar, like some maybe a C class RV that's close to what that is, and give that to them as an example. Um, but a lot of flatbed, truck camper manufacturers are going to be easy to find on the internet now, so they can
Yeah.
usually get you an RV policy for that.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's great. No, this is all super good info. It definitely is clearing some of the waters a little bit, at least for me, and I'm sure our listeners too. And that this
yeah.
kind of brings me like the golden question. Um, I'm sitting in the back of my 2006 six-pack camper, which is like a Lance, on the back of my 1997 F-250 diesel, which is in really good shape. And if and this is a common situation that our community runs into, right? They have a nice truck, they have a nice camper, it's like old vintage, it's hard to replace. Um, and my value, I would value this rig if I was going to sell it, maybe in like the $30,000 range or something higher than Kelly Blue Book would. So the golden question would be, if I value this rig at $30,000, is it possible to is there a company out there where I could just say, hey, this is what I want to insure this value for? Can you work with me? Like, can you set your own kind of, uh, I guess, replacement cost? I guess that would fall into the replacement value versus just looking up online comparable stuff and saying, yeah, we can insure that for, 10 grand or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. There's insurance companies that you can put in what you believe the value is or how much you want to insure that for, and they'll adjust your premium, your price of your policy to reflect that. And so that happens a lot when we get those like custom rigs that have, a lot of them are built on like it's really common actually with like sprinter vans and stuff like that, like custom job sprinters, like upfitters,
Exactly.
things like that. That they buy like $150,000 sprinter, but then the company will look up how much a replacement cost is for a regular 4x4 sprinter, and it's not nearly the same price. So yes, to answer your question, you can do that with some insurance companies. You can say, I want to insure this thing for, $30,000, and they'll kind of work with you to set the price for that. Um, I will say though that it does have, it has like a threshold though, because I've gotten requests to insure like, for example, like one of those, I think it's called Truck House. It's like the Tacoma with the built-in, flatbed
Right.
on it, and those things are,
Up in Tahoe.
yeah, super expensive.
Yeah.
um, and I tried to do that, name your own price, and they just won't go that high. They just, some of these were, I think one of them was, it was like this, almost the cost of like an earth roamer. It was crazy. Or earth roamers are a perfect example.
Yeah,
Those
let's
things
talk
are
about something like that.
they're like 1.3 mil, and so trying to find, I think you may have to get insurance like through Earth Roamer maybe now, or I'm sure they have, I hope they have like some type of connection for that. But you would go to these insurance companies and say, okay, I want to insure this thing for 1.3 million. And they're just going to be like, no,
Yeah,
we're not going to go that high.
that's
The risk
interesting.
is too high, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. Like it's kind of like you see a really nice house, like a big house. You're like, oh, I want that house. That house is so big and nice, but you don't really think about the cost. Aside from ownership, just the cost to insure something like that. And yeah, Earth Roamer is a great example. You see like a $300,000 rig, used Earth Roamer or something, and the premiums just must be like astronomical. If they want to recoup any of that value, which is going to be nearly impossible in terms of how they're made and everything. It's just going to be a total headache. And that's something I
Yeah,
never really thought
yeah,
about.
yeah. Well, and insurance is all about, balancing risk. Essentially insurance and companies are taking on your risk. Um, and if they're constantly looking at it, like, is this risk worth the price that we're getting to insure it for?
I
So
see.
if you've got, an $800,000 rig that you're driving cross country multiple times a year, they're going to look at that and be like, well, there's pretty high chance of an accident here. I don't know if we're going to be able to insure that. So something to keep in mind.
And that's why you put in like on your insurance thing online, like, miles driven per year estimate. I guess that's where that comes into play. I always wondered why that was there.
Exactly. Yeah. So they always are going to ask you what your mileage is, because they're calculating what your premium should be based on miles driven, the value of your vehicle, based on also, this is, we didn't even cover this, but based on your driving record, that has a lot to do with it. So they're going to ask you for your driver's license information, and if you have, any past, infractions on there, that's going to count towards you as well. So
Okay,
they're looking at the full picture to see, how much risk they're going to take on with you as a client.
I see. Um, that makes sense, right? You can't insure someone that's gotten a ton of speeding tickets and reckless this or that. So
Right.
I got
Yeah.
I'd say two more big questions, and this one it comes up in the forums all the time, especially with Tacomas. If the truck, say the truck for simplicity's sake, or say it's your truck, say the F-150, the payload capacity we'll just say is 2,000 pounds, according to the sticker on the door. But you put a camper in that say 2,500 pounds for whatever reason. Say you're transporting it for a buddy or whatever. You know it's overweight, and you're driving along, and boom, something happens. You end up wrecking the car and wrecking the camper. Are the insurance companies going to go back and say, well, technically the car was overweight, so it's out of our parameters, with the weight in the camper? Because I get this question all the time, especially with Tacoma owners. You put a camper in the back of a Tacoma, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be at or right above the gross vehicle weight rating. Do you have any insight to that?
Yeah. I mean, I see that question all the time.
Okay.
And it is a really good question. And uh, unfortunately, I don't have a solid answer, a really good answer for it, because it's really going to come down to a case by case basis.
Okay.
And, so there is really no blanket answer. I'd say, if you talk to like any first answer out of any insurance agent or insurance company or lawyer is going to be like, absolutely, if you go over the payload, we're not going to cover, just to, you know, cover their butts, but from real world example, from my experience, it really is a case by case situation. If you're one of those guys you see on Instagram and like online, sometimes they put like a massive, like host camper on like an F-150 and it snapped the frame in half. They're probably not going to cover that, because it's just like extremely obvious that that was, not a good idea and way over the
Yeah.
the carrying capacity. But um, for Tacoma, it really depends on how far you go over it. If it's in like, I would say, if it's in a reasonable amount, you're probably going to be okay, especially if you're loaded up. If you got like a light camper, maybe just like one of those, you know, uh, wedge style campers, but you've got a lot of gear in there, you're probably not going to have a big problem. But it really does come down to um, the adjuster and what insurance company you're working with. So going back to kind of what I said previously about some insurance companies, especially like the direct to consumer ones that you get online, um, they usually are much, much stricter when it comes to adjusting for claims. And they will look for any reason not to pay out because that is
Okay.
their job.
Yeah.
And so, but if you're with, maybe a more premium insurance company that is has an adjuster that's willing to work with you a little bit more, um, you have probably a lower chance of running into that. So,
Okay.
you get it, over the years, insurance has kind of become a commodity, but it really is comes down to like service. So you do have like premium brand insurance companies and you have lower brand insurance companies, and the price will dictate that. Yeah.
Interesting. So, what kind of I'm getting out of this conversation is that it does, like you just said, it matters. It matters who you go through, but also building that relationship with your insurance agent could, it's going to spell out your policy, but it's also going to maybe cover you in the back end if you have a relationship with this company or the sales agent, and you're going through the thing together, the policy together. I think a lot of times, like you were saying, with like the direct to consumer internet, we'll call it internet, go online, fill this form, boom, you're covered. It's super convenient. It might take 5 minutes, but you might be missing out a lot of things on the back end, especially if tragedy does strike. And with our rigs and our things that we value so highly, it's worth noting that, call the agent, talk to them. I don't know, check in with them maybe every a few months or so, but have like a good relationship with them, because it sounds like they're more personable than just a computer saying, "Yep, you're covered. Nope, you're not covered," and they have some leeway to maybe talk to the adjuster and say, "Hey, here's what's going on. This guy's been with us for years. They have a truck built out. I know what they're getting into. It's like a freak accident kind of thing." So that's really interesting that I'm stoked you're on the show, because we can now put a person, a face to like this whole world that's so mysterious to a lot of us. And it's really cool to hear your insights and um, kind of lay down that groundwork. So that's cool. It's really cool.
For sure, yeah, and you're absolutely right. If you have an agent that you're working with who can, if you have a bad accident, and your rig's totaled out, if you have an agent that or has seen it and they are willing to like talk to the insurance adjuster, or have your back, say, hey, this is a long-term client. We've had these guys on the books for a long time. They're great. Um, that does go a long way with some insurance companies, but
Yeah.
not all. So
Yeah.
definitely having a personal relationship does make a difference. Mhm. Like I would
Yeah.
say another important thing is like if you're upgrading your rig or customizing it, like keep records, keep receipts of everything you put in there, pictures, maintenance records, everything you possibly can. Because if you ever do get into a situation where they're asking you about that, you want to be able to present as much information as possible. Or if you have like a or like a report from like a mechanic or some third party that can like attest that you did install this or they installed it, then that'll really help you out getting that money back for sure.
Okay. Awesome. That's good to know. And would that be under the car policy or the vehicle policy or the RV policy where you can add those upgrades?
Both. I mean, really both. Because like a lot of guys, you're going to upgrade your truck suspension. Like I know I've upgraded my suspension. You know, um, and if you don't have any record of that on the policy, then unless you have like records in your own file that say, hey, like I just put this like Fox suspension in. They're gonna be like, well, we have no record. You didn't put it on the policy. We don't know. We're not going to pay you for it. So, if you've got receipts of like, you know, the coilovers that you bought and you've got receipts from the install or whatever, that's gonna go a long way.
Really? Wow,
Yeah.
that's cool, man. Yeah, it's making me want to get on the phone right now and call my insurance guy and
Yeah.
be like, we hold everything. We gotta. I'm texting you everything right now.
Yeah,
But
well, and like that, we do recommend that. Like, at Farmers, like we recommend meeting with your agent at least like once a year, go over your policies, and you review everything. And if you've made any upgrades or changes to your vehicle, tell them about it. Show them the receipts. Make sure that it's covered. Make sure they have it in their files. Um, there's that guy who I can't remember his name, but he had like this really sweet flatbed four-wheel camper that was like on the back of like a Ram like 3500, and it like totaled out. It was like an $80,000 rig, and he totaled the whole thing, just rolled it right off a cliff. It was like in a lot of the forums a few years ago, and he had State Farm, and the State Farm agent had all the receipts. Like the guy gave him copies of all the receipts to keep on file for that vehicle. So he knew all the upgrades on the truck. He knew everything that was going on with the camper. So as soon as the claim happened, the agent could actually submit it to the adjuster right there. And the guy got all of his money back. He got fully reimbursed, which is crazy. But yeah,
wow. And the adjuster, they're kind of like the gatekeeper then.
they are the gatekeeper. Yeah, they are the person you want to be nice to. Yeah.
Okay.
They're the person that's going to decide how much money you're going to get back for your vehicle. Like if it's a total loss, or even just an accident, really, if you get like rear-ended, and you submit it to your insurance, they're the ones that are going to decide how much money you're getting for that. I
Quick.
think we've covered a lot. I mean, there's a lot more to go over, but I don't want
Yeah.
to bore you too much. I would recommend, keeping your liability limits high. Don't go with basic coverage, especially in California. Probably should have mentioned that. Never go with minimum coverage. That is just that's a huge problem we run into where people are just underinsured. Um, so we always recommend at least having like 100, 300, or 100,000, 300,000 for liability. Especially around the Bay Area because there's so many high value vehicles. Property damage coverage, you definitely want to have that too. We don't recommend just having liability only. But that's usually stuff that we'd cover, one on one. Yeah.
That's great. And then the last thing I want to hit on is maybe not briefly, maybe briefly, but I know you cover or you talked about covering Mexico insurance, like Baja vehicles bound for Baja. What's kind of your general guidance when going about insurance for Mexico?
Yeah, yeah, I do a lot of Mexico policies. It's definitely a must-have. If you're going to Mexico or going to Baja, you've got to have Mexico insurance. Um, I actually kind of put some notes together for this just because it's so important. If you have an auto policy, written in the US, sometimes they'll say like, oh, you're covered across the border, but you're really only covered maybe a couple miles, in like these green zones, border
Okay.
cities, and that's designed for people who cross the border daily, uh, to like go to the store, things like that.
Sure.
Or for trade or business or commercial use and stuff like that. But it's not really designed to like go in country for any like really more than like 5 miles, I'd say, where some has say like 20 miles, but still, you know Mexico has very different laws when it comes to um, auto insurance, because auto accidents are not just civil offenses there, they're criminal offenses. So if you go across the border, I mean, even in Baja, and get in an accident with a local, and you're first of all, your rig's probably going to, you don't have insurance, you're probably going to get impounded, and you could go to jail. So super important to have insurance, and it's not really that expensive, so it's totally worth getting. But they have set liability limits that you need to have for your vehicle or as a driver, and there's plenty of good companies that provide coverage. But it's important to make sure that you have the minimum liability limit. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can certainly look it up. I also usually recommend going way above that liability limit, because you never know what situation you might get into down there. And having more insurance is definitely going to be better than not having enough. Yeah.
Awesome. And I know when you go down to Mexico, you can buy insurance down there. Would you recommend buying it here in the United States or down in Mexico?
I usually recommend buying it beforehand. That way you're covered. You don't have to worry about trying to handle it, when you're crossing the border. You've got all your paperwork set, you got everything printed out. When you're going to, I go to Baja frequently and I rarely get asked for my insurance information, but I usually, I'll print everything out beforehand. I'll have it in a file and it's in the glove box. So if anything happens, I can pull that out. I can give it to the police. But also, I mean, this rarely happens in Baja, but also if you get like a shakedown, by a local municipal cop, it, first thing they're probably going to ask you for is your insurance.
Yeah.
So you can just pull that out and give that to them. But I've got a company that I work with that I recommend because what they do is not only will they insure the vehicle, but they'll insure the driver. So the nice thing about that is if you go and drive a different vehicle while you're there, you're still covered. A lot of times you'll buy a Mexico insurance policy and it's just for the vehicle that you're driving. So if you go and like rent a car or drive someone else's vehicle or like ride somebody else's motorcycle while you're there and you crash it or get in an accident, you're not going to be covered unless that vehicle is covered. So the policies that I like to sign people up for are ones that insure the driver themselves, so that you have a
That's a
lot
really good.
lot more flexibility.
Yeah, that's a super good insightful tip that I don't think I wouldn't have just gone and done that, if I was going down to Mexico, I wouldn't have gone on my way to look for insurance policy like that. So,
Yeah,
you obviously have
yeah.
a ton of insight and a ton of really good information with this whole, in the whole insurance world. And I'm going to put a link down below in this podcast notes to get in contact with you if people have questions, or if you want to put some notes down there too about these companies that you are recommending. We can definitely make sure our listeners are aware of that. Um, and before we go, I just want to know: do you have anything else you want to share with the community about insurance or kind of anything really?
Well, a couple other you're going to Baja, you can find all this online, but sometimes you don't really think about it until you're like almost there, and then you're trying to scramble to get it done. So, yeah, if you're going to Baja, make sure if you're going to mainland, you got to have like a vehicle permit. So you don't need a vehicle permit to go into Baja and back home, but if you're going to like go through Baja and then take the ferry over to mainland, you got to have a vehicle permit because they'll just turn you around. You got to go back to the border and you've got to get that permit. So
Dang.
make sure you get your vehicle permit if you're going to be traveling to mainland Mexico from Baja. That's super important. And then also, I definitely recommend getting some like property coverage on your vehicle. So when you're getting your policy, they'll ask you the VIN, make, model of your vehicle. Definitely get some property coverage because driving in Mexico, it's a lot different than driving here, and
Yep.
it's great. It's a beautiful country. It's fantastic, but you can if you watch follow any YouTubers that go to Baja, there's usually some damage done to the rigs. So definitely, and that's usually just from their own fault driving. So
Oh yeah.
definitely get some damage coverage on your rig, which is important. And I think yeah, that's really about it. But yeah, if you guys need any help, anyone needs any help, I'm happy to help out and just work with your local insurance agent. Make sure you're covered.
Awesome, David. That was some really good insight. Thanks so much for taking the time and meeting up with me today and getting able to do this podcast. I totally appreciate it. But yeah, until then, man, we'll see you out there on the road. And thanks so much again.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Spencer.